Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Wealth Through Homeownership. I am Kim Von Dohren, your Realtor.
And I'm your banker, Ed Marko. Well, we had a great weekend. We got a bunch of questions. And one of the biggest questions we got is, what's the difference between an appraisal and a home inspection? And what's an FHA appraisal home inspection?
Right.
So we're going to kind of cover those three things. We'll talk about appraisals, and we'll talk about inspections, and then we'll talk about what the FHA does when they come into someone's home to generate a value.
Perfect, because they are not the same thing.
They are not. Do you want to go first with what's a home inspection, or?
Sure.
Okay.
So a home inspection is one of several inspections that you can elect when you choose to purchase a home. And we won't go into the dynamics of should you or shouldn't you elect that home inspection given the market, because it puts you potentially at a disadvantage at the moment. But a home inspection is where the buyer pays a home inspector to come in and inspect the home, as stated by its name. What's the value in that? Well, that person is really working for the buyer, and they are going through the home looking to be sure that there is no dysfunction in systems or structure. They are looking to see if there are any safety issues. But what they're overall doing is they are assessing the home and providing you then with a report that's about 30 to 40 pages long and explains condition, age, expected life of certain things. And they'll begin, truly, my home inspector will put a ladder up on the house and he will be up on the roof looking at the shingles or metal roof or whatever is up there. And he's going to go through the home from the top, the roof, all the way down to the bottom of the basement. And he's going to check every single system. He's going to run the HVAC system. If there's an air conditioner and it's winter, he can't run it, but he is going to do his best to assess whether or not that system is functioning properly. He's going to check for leaks. He's going to run the dishwasher. If there's a spa tub, he's going to turn it on. He's going to see, does it get hot? Does the water go through the jets, etc. So it gives people a much greater sense of peace when they're purchasing a home, especially a first-time home buyer, because they know that someone has looked at the home with, discriminating eyes to see, is there anything here that I should be concerned about? And the other thing is it gives you, the buyer, the option to terminate the contract and walk away. So if something's discovered in the home inspection that is a deal breaker for you, or you discover something and the seller doesn't want to correct it, or you can't negotiate a way that you both feel good about, you can walk away from the transaction. Now, that is not in any way assessing value. It's assessing condition. So I, as a buyer agent, love a home inspection.
Right. So yeah, definitely worthwhile doing. In fact, you sometimes though, you might not want to get a home inspection done, or you feel like you don't want to get a home inspection done because you feel it puts you in a bad light for your purchase offer. But you could actually have a home inspection done without making it a requirement for the purchase, just so you know what's going on with that house, kind of going in eyes wide open. When you're going to buy the house anyway, you want to know whatever's wrong with it so that when you move in, you don't have a surprise.
Right. So you can still have, what we call that for information purposes.
Right.
And the way we would do that is we would say that in the contract. We would say, we want to do a home inspection, but we are not going to ask for any corrections.
Right.
However, it does still secure your ability to walk away. So if something's discovered, say there's a structural issue with a wall in the basement, and now you're like, well, I understand this is an issue that I'd have to correct down the road. I really don't want to deal with that. You can still walk away, but you've agreed that you're not going to go back and ask for the seller to correct or to change the price. You're going to just do it for information purposes.
For information purposes. And then this is something optional. You can do it or not do it.
Correct. Right. You can choose to do a home inspection, or you do not have to do one, because you are paying for that out of your own pocket, and you can't expect to pay I would say $380 minimally and up, depending on the size of the home.
Right. So now the appraisal, though, that's a completely different thing. That is a federal requirement when you're purchasing a home. The bank is going to hire somebody and you're going to pay for them. If you're the buyer, you get to pay the appraiser, and it's not optional. The appraisal is for value. So they certainly look at some of the things, the same things that the inspector is going to look at, but it's a completely different set of eyes looking at it, and they're looking at it through completely different lenses.
Correct.
What they're trying to determine is the value of the house equivalent to the amount that it's being sold for, or get it as close as possible to make sure that it's in line with federal regulations. So that person is going to come in the house, and they're looking at how large is the house, how many bedrooms does it have, what kind of heating system does it have, what kind of HVAC does it have, if it's a whole HVAC system, how new is it, what is the general condition of it. A lot of things don't affect value too much, like if the carpets are worn out and things of that nature, but a lot of things have a huge effect on the value, like all of the houses in this neighborhood have garages. This one does not have a garage.
Right.
So they're looking for things like that. And then they're going to take all that information that they gathered up. Now they're going to do certain things. If they see a gaping hole in the roof, that's going to be a problem. They're going to
Yes.
they're going to point at that. All the windows and doors have to function, close and lock. The heater has to turn off and on. The electricity has to work all the way around the house. All of the services have to work. The water has to run. The toilets have to flush. But if the toilets flush and they're from the 1950s, that's okay.
Right.
They're not worried about that. Although that again would probably affect the value. So they're going to take all of that data back to their office, and then they're going to compare that to what are called comps. They're going to look for a minimum of 3 properties in that general area that have sold preferably in the last 6 months that are similar to the house that they're doing the appraisal on. And they're going to use that information to go through this process to come up with an actual value of that property. These people are licensed, they're educated, they have to take continuing education classes every year, just like a real estate agent or a lender does. They're really, in the last particular 10 years, became super professional. They're incredibly accurate 90% of the time, maybe 99% of the time, when it comes to determining a value on property. And when they're done, you're going to get the same kind of a report. It's probably about a dozen pages long, not 40 pages, but a dozen pages long. And it's going to go through all of these different points of interest that explain how they came up with the value of that property. How many acres is it? Where is it located? School districts, garages, not garages, attics, not attics, basements, not basements, all those things come into play, and they present the value to the bank, and then the bank shares that appraisal with you. And a lot of people say, where's my appraisal? I can't stress enough, you get to pay for this, but it's not your appraisal. You get a copy of the appraisal that goes to Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae or the FHA or the VA, or it's theirs. You pay for it, they own it. So just that comes up every once in a while where somebody has a problem with an appraisal and they want their appraisal. We give them a copy of it, but to be clear, that belongs to the lending body, which is usually Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, or FHA.
So you're saying that they actually pay for the appraisal but don't own it?
Correct, yes.
But they do get a copy.
But you get a copy of it, yes. And there are specific situations where that comes into play. We can get into that maybe on another podcast, but I do like to point that out to people. They're paying for it. They don't own it. That belongs to, in my case, I'm a Freddie lender. So in my case, it belongs to Freddie. We don't own it. Nobody owns it that's involved in the transaction except Freddie, which kind of leads to the next thing. So we covered appraisals, we covered inspections, and then we have this other kind of thing in the room, which is FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, who does lending as well. And they require their own special appraisal that also has a home inspection component to it.
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yes.
Yes.
It's, yeah. I mean, they are looking for things, but
Right.
they're not specifically doing a home inspection in the manner in which I described it.
Right.
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 And we should be clear about this. We always use FHA as the default, but that's not the only alphabet loan that does it,
Right.
correct?
Right. VA, USDA, there's probably a bunch more of the 403k or whatever it's called.
Yeah, that's an
Um,
FHA,
yeah, that's a type of FHA.
203K.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of alpha. I like that term, alphabet lenders.
Yeah.
Um, but to be clear, a lot of sellers don't want an FHA or VA inspection done on their home. Do you want to elaborate on why that is?
Yes. I'll give you an example. Last night I did a meet and greet for a listing appointment where we walked through the home and everything looked great. And then we walked outside and I saw that she had chipping paint on the roof line of her front porch where the gutter goes. So her home was built in 1930, which means that you have to assume that there is lead-based paint in one of those layers on that home. And if that paint chips off and falls to the ground and someone eats it, they are now eating lead. Now I think people think, who is going to eat it? But kids eat it or animals eat it. And then it can make them very unwell. So it's a safety issue. And because she has that situation, unless she wants to scrape and paint it, we don't necessarily want her buyer, when we list her home, to have an FHA loan, because that is one of the things that they're going to be looking for when they do the appraisal. That's not an inspection per se, but that is a detection they're looking for when they're out there doing the FHA appraisal, correct?
Correct. Yeah. They look for chipping paint. They look for non-functioning windows in the attic. That could be a hazard if somebody's trapped up there. Windows have to open. Nobody opens their attic windows anymore,
Right.
but they need to open. Handrails in the strangest places. If you've got one step outside in your backyard, they're probably going to want you to put up a handrail.
3 or more steps.
Is it 3 or more?
3 or
Okay,
more
3 or
steps.
more steps. You need to put up a handrail.
Yes.
All those kind of
Yeah.
there's a whole list of them.
Yes.
Some of it's great and it's good. Sometimes folks only qualify for an FHA mortgage.
Right.
In which case, then these are the hoops that somebody would have to jump through.
Right.
You just need to know that a lot of sellers aren't going to look at your offer because they don't want that FHA appraiser tramping through their house looking for things that they don't think are problems.
Right. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, we wanted people to understand that if you use an FHA loan, you are not getting a home inspection along with that appraisal. You are getting safety detections. They are searching to make sure there's GFC, ground fault protected outlets where there's water, and railings where there's a falling hazard. So that is not a home inspection. That is just for the purposes of being sure that the home is safe from some basic threats.
Safe from the things that are on their list. They stay very
Right.
specific to their list.
Correct.
So that's why the home inspection, an all-encompassing home inspection, even if you're not going to use it as part of your purchase offer, you're going to put. I strongly recommend most people get those done. If you don't do, at least have somebody that you respect walk through that house with you slowly. Somebody that knows about owning a house, somebody that's experienced, somebody that maybe somebody that builds houses or something like that. At the very least, but very big on home inspections.
Right.
And the appraisal is required. So
yes, if you're using a lender.
Right. If you're paying cash, you can do whatever you want.
Right. If you're paying cash, you do not have to have an appraisal.
That's true. That's absolutely
Doesn't mean
true.
you don't want one necessarily. You still can pay for one and do one.
Yeah.
But you're not required.
Not required.
Right. So I think.
But to the 99.9% of you out there that are going to use a lender.
Yeah. You're going to have an appraisal.
You're going to have an appraisal.
Which is good. A discussion around it not coming in at value is a whole nother topic. And unfortunately, that it does happen. I always used to say the appraiser is one of the most powerful people in your transaction because they're going to assess value, and that's on both sides. So you want to make sure that everybody who is a professional up to that point has assessed properly the value of that home as well.
Absolutely. So that's it. The difference between an appraisal, a home inspection, and an FHA appraisal inspection.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Ed Marko.
And I'm Kimberly Von Dohren.
You have been listening to Brick by Brick. Be sure and subscribe, post questions for future episodes, or comment. This is a Super Squirrel production, Super Squirrel Studios, Stony Creek Mills, Pennsylvania.